Thank you and welcome back to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name is Eric. I'm joined by my co-host Kevin. Welcome back for our 71st episode this week, where we'll be recapping the Patriots free agency so far and their off season. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pats 300 Level Pod for up to the minute updates and commentary of news of the day, as well as at our website at pats300levelpod.com. So Kevin, or just everyone, welcome back. I know it's been a few weeks since free agency started. We were initially planning on having this episode the week after the opening of free agency. However, one of us was sick, and then the other of us, the following week when Kevin was better, I had to travel for work. So this is the first time we've really been able to. So apologies on being a little later than we were hoping, but I think it's still relevant to discuss. So I know some of us or some Patriots fans were excited about this offseason, going into it with right around $100 million in cap space. One of the first things Gerard Mayo said was that we're going to bring in talent 100% and we're going to burn some cash. Elliot Wolf, the Patriots de facto GM, said we're going to, quote, weaponize the offense. So a lot of people were excited as the free agency was about to get going. A lot of that hasn't happened. I don't think that's to any of our surprise. We talked about it on our previous episode. We weren't really expecting much. So what were is just your overall thoughts? I guess 2 to 3 weeks, almost 3 weeks into free agency so far.
I think my overall thoughts, I'm not really surprised about what happened and really the signings that took place. Um, yeah, I think they pretty much did what we were expecting them to do. I don't think that anything was overly exciting. I also don't think there was anyone overly talented enough where you would want to actually spend the money on. That's the problem with free agency where back in 21 that was a unique situation where there was a lot of players that were hitting the market earlier than they were supposed to, just because the way that the cap space was,
And
and the
that's
pay.
because of COVID, because revenue
Mhm,
the previous year went down because there was no in fan. So because of that, cap space went down. So teams had
mhm,
to let players go, and the Patriots had a ton of cap space because they never really sell the future. So they
mhm.
had a lot of cap space, and then more marquee free agents were available.
Yep, and that's the exception to the rule. So that's
Yep.
where it worked out for the Patriots for the most part, where they were able to sign some really talented guys and get them. Whereas this year and most years, the players that are uber talented, the teams that they're on never let them hit free agency, so they never have the opportunity to reach the market and get a contract unless the team is in such dire straits so they can't afford them. Even in that aspect, they find a way to manipulate it enough so that way they can at least trade the guy. And you saw
Yep.
that this year. You saw it with Snead. You saw that with the Panthers with one of blanking on his
Burns.
name, Burns, and just other players. So you see
Yeah.
that over time where if someone is really talented, a team is going to want to at least get something for him before letting him walk. The few exceptions, Kirk Cousins, but he's 36 coming off an Achilles. Um, and that's the biggest one, I would say.
And then
Um,
Wilkins from the Dolphins, but that's partially because the Dolphins were, I believe, 20 or 40 million over the cap,
mhm,
and they had to pretty much purge cap space, so they weren't able to re-sign him, and they had other people that they had to get rid of too.
yeah. So looking at really the moves they made, I'm happy at least with the re-signings that they did because I didn't actually expect them to re-sign Michael Wino. I thought that he was going to be the one to get away and someone was going to
Same.
overpay him even more. And then
Especially with them deciding to tag Duggar instead of
mhm.
Elenu, which we talked about last episode. But
Yep. But as far as the re-signings go, we talked last episode, Henry, Bourne, and Duggar. I was happy about those. Um, Duggar, I was a little surprised about tagging rather than Owenu, but it ended up working out because you got both
yep,
of them back. Supposedly Duggar isn't happy about the transition tag, but honestly, he's going to get paid more in the transition tag than he's probably going to get as a contract because safeties right now aren't being valued as much. And there's a bunch of kind of marquee safeties out there, and they're not getting the money that they were hoping to get in
yep.
ones contracts that safeties did get in the past. So he's pretty much going to have to sign that or the Patriots could actually rescind the offer, and then they could always sign him for less or sign someone else for less. Um,
Yeah, I feel though if they rescind the offer, then he's going to want to just go elsewhere,
oh yeah,
unless like
they would
Patriots
sign.
have.
They would have to just sign someone else. But
Yeah.
there's a bunch of other premier safeties out there, so it's not the worst thing in the world.
Yep.
Um, and you still have Peppers. So Michael Endo was I think the premier one that I wanted. You need
Yep.
a cornerstone tackle, and that's what he is. And for Jennings, I was really excited about just because he really came on towards the end of last year,
Yeah.
and it was really good. Uche was really
Yeah.
surprising because he.
Jennings too was great. He was good pass rushing, but he was also
Mhm,
phenomenal setting the edge on the run
yeah.
as well. And that's something that a lot of times it's tough to have players that are both good in pass
Hmm.
rush as well as against the run, defending the run. And he was phenomenal. So it's good that they were able to re-sign him for 3 years.
Hmm.
So you have him going forward. Hopefully he takes that, continues progressing next year. But he was underperforming due to injuries and lack of playing time his first 3 years. But this year he
Hmm.
really stepped up,
Yep.
especially the second half of the season.
Yep. Uche was actually surprising just
Yeah,
because supposedly he had an offer out there that was basically kind of double what the Patriots were offering. It was a 2-year contract for I didn't write this part down, but I think it was what $12 million
I think
guaranteed.
so.
Where he got $3 million guaranteed with the Patriots,
Which
1 year
again, we don't
deal.
the guarantees might be coming from agents, so we don't really know if it's like
Yeah.
true guaranteed or not. But
And it has the with incentives up to $8 million. Um, and again, this is someone where I didn't really see the need to spend a lot of money on him, and they didn't, so that was good.
yep,
Because I think one thing he's really good at he's good at rushing the passer. But he's not really good at setting the edge and
yep,
containing the run. He started a little bit towards the end of the year, but Jennings really took most of the snaps there. So getting him a low kind of money contract, I'm happy with that. I wouldn't have overpaid for him. I'm glad they didn't. And then Jalen Rieger is the last free signing. Low money, but he's actually probably going to be more useful this year because of the kickoff change.
yep,
So it's actually going to be probably a bargain for him. And maybe he can one day figure something out at receiver. I doubt it. He's got hands of stone, but who knows?
yeah. And I agree pretty much with everything you said. Like you were talking about before, Henry Bourne and Duggar, we talked about last episode. We think they're all good signings. Bourne was one of your top receivers the last few years. It's not a great free agency class for wide receivers, as we alluded
Mhm,
to, and we'll talk about in a little bit. So by re-signing one of the best options for lower money, he is coming off an ACL. He is getting, I think he's 29, but he
mhm,
still has been productive for you. And for wide receivers, ACL isn't really a big deal anymore.
mhm,
So that was good. I was very happy with Jennings. He was the outside of Onwenu and Duggar, he was the one guy I really wanted them to resign based on his value for that defense. Him being able to play both the rush and the defend the rush, ru- defend the running attack, and defend the pass as well. So very happy with that. Like you said, Uche wasn't really expecting him to come back, but for low money, it makes sense. In Bill's defense, would have been interested to see how if Bill would have brought him back, but I wonder if it's part of with Covington taking the reins of defensive coordinator, if maybe he plans on rushing the quarterback more and utilizing Uche in that way, or if maybe he just likes him because he was the defensive line coach.
mhm. All right. Signing. So we talked about the free agency class. It was actually probably the better of the ones were the ones that you're just re-signing yourself. I don't think
Yep.
there was any free agent that really moved the needle more than kind of the guys that you had.
The
Um,
only free agent that we alluded to before that I really wanted was Wilkins,
mhm,
the defensive tackle from Miami, and he ended up going to Vegas. But I wasn't really too upset about that because he went to Vegas
mhm,
for 4 years, 112 million or 118 million. So it was right around 28 and change a year AAV. And that's in Vegas with no income tax, state income tax. So in order for him to come here, you'd be paying him over 120 million, which is over 30 AAV.
mhm,
And if you do that, if you want to re-sign extend Barmore, he's going to want at least that, maybe more, just because of his age and how well he's played. So by doing that, you'd be committing over 60 million a year for just the defensive tackle position, which is just too much. If you're able to get him 20 to 24 million, it might be worth it. And then you can have both him and Barmore for 40 to 48. But I think 60 million plus AAV is just insane for that. So
Yep.
I wasn't too broken up about him signing for that money.
Yep. All right. So going on to kind of one of the things that you mentioned, really, the income tax is we can actually address. I didn't put it in here, but one of the guys that they did try and go after and weren't able to get was Calvin Ridley, and I'm not really that upset that they didn't get him based off of the money he was getting. So over
Yep.
$20 million for him. He's not a number one wide receiver.
I think
He's
he went for 23 million a year. The Patriots offered 22 as some of the
Mhm,
reports. Granted, if they're true or not, who really
mhm.
knows? But
Yeah, but one of the things too is going to the Titans. You have to compete with a state that doesn't have income tax.
yep,
So if they wanted to really go up there and at least match what he was getting, you would have to go to at least
25
25,
million.
26 for that. And there's other reports out there. He didn't want to leave the South. He didn't want to go to the Northeast. Bob Kraft threw his wife under the bus, but called him his girlfriend and said that she didn't want to go to New England. She wanted to stay in the South. And the other reports saying that he wanted a quarterback, although Will Levis, I think, has potential. He's also not
Eh,
anything
I don't think Will
established.
Levis is
So,
that
like,
good.
uh, it's really just, I think, the money, the location is probably the biggest thing. And I want to go
Yep.
spending that much money on him where he's not a true number one wide receiver. Um, I would have spent that money on like T. Higgins, or Pittman if they made it, just because
Pittman, yeah.
they're
Pittman, I
like a
would.
1B kind of
Yep.
receiver. They're not like a true number one, like
I think Michael
this is a
Pittman's a true
guy.
number one.
But you don't have that. You even have a 1B right now. You don't really have a number two, kind of. You can make the argument saying that if Demaro Douglas takes the next step forward, or if Bourne is more comfortable in like the West Coast scheme, maybe Bourne could make it to the number two. It's more likely a three. Um, the one that would really have to make that jump would be Douglas, and I just don't see it yet, just based on his size and his injury history now. But they don't have one or two, so I think
Yep.
you would be spending that money to get someone that's close to a one for the one of those two guys. Ridley, I don't think is. I think Ridley's a number two, and it'd be a drastic overpayment for that. And he's had other issues uh, outside of just football, so he's had the gambling, and he's missed some other time. So
And the thing with Ridley too is that he did have a down year this past year and
mhm,
still put up well over 1,000 yards. But the reports are that he has difficulty understanding the offense that
mhm,
he's put in. And also, he does have some issues with drops. So he is inconsistent give him 24, 25 million a year. I just didn't think it would be worth it. I'd rather spend that money elsewhere on the roster and then
mhm,
spend early or late first, early second round pick on a wide receiver, maybe get another one, or try and evaluate via trade. Maybe you can still get T. Higgins for later draft pick, or
mhm.
maybe if you really want Brandon Ayuk or someone else. But for that amount of money, I'd rather spend it elsewhere than Calvin Ridley, who's 29, two, maybe 1B, but again, I don't think he's worth that much money. I think Brandon
Mhm,
Pittman is. I don't think T. Higgins is, in my opinion,
mhm,
that amount, just because and he does have injury history. Also, it's tough to really know how good he is with Jamar Chase on the other side of him, and then also having Tyler Boyd. And he
mhm,
never really lived up to that full potential. I still think he's good, but I don't know him being a number one, and then your next best wide receiver is
mhm,
Pop Douglas or Kendrick Bourne. Is he really going to be able to stand out?
mhm,
Now, if you draft someone at 34 or late in the first
mhm.
who ends up being a number one, he might not have to be a number one.
Yeah,
The guy you draft could be your number one, and then T. Higgins be your number two, and then with the rookie being on a rookie contract, it
it's kind of a
evens out.
wash. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, so that's what I would have really thought about doing because that's my plan. And we'll talk about this when we get to the draft. But
yep,
my plan would be drafting a wide receiver relatively high to
yep,
eventually be that number one. So that way it would make sense that even if you are spending a little bit overspending for that guy to be that 1B two receiver, it would even out really and be a wash with
Yep.
the rookie. So going on to the guys that the Patriots signed, I'll do some kind of wash away ones first, and then we can get
Yep.
into the big chunk. So Jalen Hawkins, veteran minimum 1 year from the Chargers. Nick Leverett, guard from Tampa. So both of those guys were kind of backups. Armon Watts, defensive tackle from Pittsburgh,
I
was
don't think
also a
Hawkins was from. I thought Hawkins was from the Falcons.
I think he was cut by the Falcons and then signed mid-year by the Chargers, is what I was reading.
Okay.
Um, and then I'll throw Austin Hooper kind of as a throwaway too. So tight end from the Raiders. Everyone usually knows him really from the Falcons more. That's where he was most productive.
Yep.
Um,
You're right on
1 year,
Hawkins.
$3 million up to 4.25.
Yep.
Then we'll start getting now
One
into.
one thing with Hooper too, though, was he did play in Cleveland with, I believe, Cleveland with Van Pelt. So
Mhm.
he's played under the Patriots offensive coordinator. He knows the system, so that's at least a benefit. He's now more of a blocking tight end, but still someone that at least knows the offense. So
Yeah. So the first one, Sion, I'm gonna butcher this guy's last name. Takataki.
yeah,
2 years, $6.65 million. Comes to the Browns. Elliot Wolf, if you kind of there was a clip out there on Twitter. You can listen to him, was raving about him. I think when they drafted him. So this is someone that he knows well, and has some really good kind of advanced metrics around him. So he's, I think, really that guy to replace Mac Wilson. So he should be actually, I think, really a sneaky, interesting player to kind of watch
yeah.
on the defense.
He was
And
a third round pick, I believe, in
yep, third round
2019.
pick.
And some of the statistics have him as one of the better coverage linebackers in the NFL last year.
Hmm.
So he can rush the quarterback. He can go in coverage. So not a lot of money, but sneaky, like you said, a sneaky pick for the defense that might be able to help bolster a linebacker room, which I think overplayed their potential last year with Bentley Tavai,
Hmm.
Mac Wilson Jennings. You lose Mac, but bringing him in, granted, what's it going to be like for those players not having Bill and Steve? I
Hmm.
think that's a very fair concern. How much of their growth was due to Steve, who is a linebackers coach, as well as Bill, who is creating the game plans, and even Steve, who is implementing the game plans and calling the plays versus not having them there. So I will definitely wait to see, but it's a I think adding him can only help.
Yep.
And it's not
Uh,
that much money either. I think two
Agreed.
years, 6.6 million, you said?
Yeah, 2 years, 6.65. So not anything crazy high.
Yeah.
Next one, Antonio Gibson, 3 years, 11.25 up to 17.25 million. So the base guaranteed about $4 million a year, up to almost 6 million. So he's, I think, one of the guys that's gonna be one of the kind of running backs you've lacked over the last couple of years, where he's
Yep.
that receiving back where you haven't had since James White really. Brandon
Yep.
Bolden kind of took it over a little bit, but even him, he's not the kind of receiving back that you need. Um, and then Zeke,
And
while
then
was good in
just
the
with
passing
Gibson,
game, is just a little different than what Gibson is. So go
Uh,
ahead.
I was just going to say, I thought you were moving on to the next
No.
player, but the thing with Gibson too is, yes, he is a receiving back. He does add that element, but he has been an effective and productive runner as well. A few years ago, I believe 2021, he ran for over 1,000 yards. A year before, he had 11 touchdowns. So he definitely, I think you'll be utilizing him as a third down back, but he can add that rushing ability behind Ramondre as well, especially if I know Mondre got hurt at the end of the year. He got hurt towards the end of the year previous year, but played through injuries. But
Hmm.
you have that different style runner, different style back, but someone that can help this offense and something that they've been missing the last few years, like you said, since James White was out.
Yep. All right, next one. So we were looking for them to weaponize the offense,
Yeah.
and they got KJ Osborne, receiver from Minnesota, 1 year, $4 million. Uh, Nothing really is weaponizing the offense with him. He's a good, solid number 3-4 receiver.
Yep.
But if you're hoping for him to be anything really more than that, that's not really what he is.
Yep.
He's going to be your dependable, like 40, 50 catches a year, gets around 600 yards, but he's nothing really that more than that. So he's a good depth piece, but he's not someone that's going to weaponize his offense or help really burn some cash. So, um, he's a it depends on what they're hoping for him. If they're knowing that he's going to be that 4 wide receiver, which they've got a ton of, so they've
Yep.
got a ton of those 3-4 receivers. Um, it's it's kind of crowded, but we'll kind of we'll see kind of how they go from there. I do wonder if what they're planning on doing with Juju. I would still try and ride him out and see what happens because he was a solid, dependable guy for the Chiefs the year before. I
Yep.
highly doubt his knee could be that bad, but it could be. We saw
Yeah.
Malcolm Mitchell; he was out of the league at like what 25. So um, maybe it is bad, but we'll see.
Yep. No, I think you characterized that perfectly. He's a good 3B, 4A receiver. You're not signing him to be, or at least I hope you're not signing him to be your number one receiver. He's been in the league 4 years. Didn't have a catch his first year. Year two, 50 catches, 655 yards, 7 TDs. Year three, 60 catches, 650 yards, 5 TDs. Year four, 48 catches, 540 yards, 3 TDs. So decent productivity, but you also have to think Justin Jefferson was the number one wide receiver. Number two wide, so he's most likely always getting double teamed. Number two wide receiver was Adam Thielen for years, and now this year Jordan Addison. So you've had very productive wide receiver ones and wide receiver twos. So being a number three receiver, number four receiver, even with also having a good tight end and Hawkinson as well.
Mhm.
Now he's really the fourth or fifth option. So that's how he can
He's
get some
getting open, right?
productivity.
Yeah.
So it's if you're relying on him to be your number one or number two wide receiver, maybe he can take that leap and make a breakthrough. But signing him 1 year, 4 million, you're not really expecting him to be. So I know he's a new wide receiver for this offense, but I'm not expecting a ton of productivity. Again, if he gives you 500 yards, I think that might have been led the team last year or
Douglas, I think, had more than that.
Uh,
If I had to guess,
I know Douglas had 60 something catches,
and
or let's see.
I think he broke their record too for rookie receiving yards.
He did not. He broke it under Bill Belichick. The rookie record
Oh,
is
was it Glenn?
Terry Glenn with 95 catches and I think over a
Mhm.
thousand yards. So Douglas
Okay,
had 49 catches, 561 yards. So
I think that led the
Osborne,
team.
yeah, Osborne would have been second on the team in catches, but one behind Douglas, and then he would have been 20 yards behind Douglas. So close to being your number two wide receiver, but.
All right, next one,
Oh,
Jacoby
and
Brissett.
just to
Oh,
reiterate what you said about Juju, if they get rid of him, you're essentially eating all his cap space this year. So at least take him into training camp, see if you got something. If he doesn't win out a roster spot, then cut him by all means.
mhm.
But he still might have something. He was almost had 1,000 yards the year before with the Chiefs. He did have 1,500 yards somehow a few years ago. But it's worth a shot. If he doesn't win the camp battle, then so be it. You have a ton of cap space anyway. But because of that, since you're going to be eating it regardless, at least take it into camp and see.
Yep, and it's also going to be really interesting to see because um, the guys that you would think would be on the cusp of a roster, these aren't really Bills guys that you would
Yep.
say, oh, it doesn't really fucking matter. We'll just get rid of them. We didn't want him anyway. Juju was the one that they had to sell Bill on that they really wanted and said they wanted him more than Myers. And Bill was the one that wanted Jacoby Myers first.
Yep.
And they ended up going Juju because Bill was supposed to be more collaborative, and that's what Robert wanted. So Bill conceded, and then Tyquan Thornton, where he was kind of more of a Matt Groh pick. And is that someone where, well, if this was like Bill's guy, would they say, "I'll just get rid of him at training camp"? But this is the guy that they wanted, so they're gonna try and see what happens with him. So that'll be just a kind of an interesting storyline to see how much leeway they give some of their own guys that they're the one responsible for bringing in, which is
Yep.
also kind of what's different about what they kind of did, where they have all the same personnel group still here, but just a different coach. So, um, all right, going on. Before keep ranting, Jacoby Brissett. I don't think
My
either of
guy.
us were surprised about this.
Yep.
It's not someone I wanted, but
It's
I
someone
could
I
see
wanted.
why they did it. Eric mentioned last episode why he wanted Jacoby, and it makes sense just from a scheme perspective and someone they're used to, and being around there. I would have preferred, like I said, even though Baker wasn't available, but maybe they could have let it been known he would have resigned to Tampa. Um, I would have preferred Baker, and then I would have preferred Gardner Minshew. But here's what we got: we got Jacoby Brissett.
So I just gotta I know I talked about this last episode, but I just have to bring it up because again, if you think Baker Mayfield is a top 10, top 5 quarterback that can win you
Mhm.
a Super Bowl, that's one thing. I don't think he is. I don't know if you think he is a top 5 quarterback, top 7 quarterback, but if
I think
you
he's top
don't,
10.
I don't think he is.
He's
You think he's top?
he's the top 10 quarterback, and he's a winner, and that's what puts him over some of the other ones. Where once you get, we did this exercise, we do this all the time, where we go through and rank, and we'll maybe do this, maybe we'll do it before the draft,
Yeah.
and rank like your quarter top 10, top 15 quarterbacks. Once you get to 6 or 7, they're all the same. They're all like Jimmy Garoppolo light, where you get Matt Stafford, you get Baker, you get all Tannehill, you get all those sorts of guys that are all the same. And I think what puts some of these guys ahead of the other ones is just their competitiveness and how much they um really do on game day and win, and have that extra to them, where some guys are
So
just losers.
so
Uh,
unless in the NFL, unless you're on a rookie contract or you're a top 7 quarterback, if you're making 30 to 40 million dollars a year and you're not a top 7 to 10 quarterback, which I don't think Baker is, you're not going to be successful. You're going to be stuck in an endless loop of mediocrity where you're good enough to make the playoffs or possibly make the playoffs as a wild card team. You're not good enough to win a Super Bowl. You're not good enough to get an improvement at the quarterback position, which this year you are. Granted, if you don't like Jaden Daniels, if you don't like Drake May, you don't like JJ, which we both don't, you don't like Michael Penix, that's one thing. But still, they at least have upside to potentially be that option. Baker Mayfield has shown you what he is, and I don't think he's a top 10 quarterback. He was productive this past year with two former All Pro, Pro Bowl wide receivers in this offense, which he won't have. Is he going to be productive? Is he going to win you a Super Bowl? I say no.
he got the Browns to the playoffs for the first time in years,
With
and
Alex Van Pelt, but
put that team on the map. Um, and
and who did he
going
have
back,
as wide receivers? Who did he have as running backs? Who
he had
did he have the
talent.
best offensive line in football?
Well, it doesn't mean that the Patriots wouldn't be able to improve. So what I would have done in that situation is I wouldn't have banked on Baker being my quarterback for the next 10 years. He signed basically a 2-year deal with the Bucks. It was
Pretty
three
much 2 years
years.
guaranteed. But if you're
Yeah,
drafting a guy at 3,
I still would have done it. I would have drafted a quarterback at 3. I would have signed Baker. I would have figured it out after year one.
Baker
Um,
wouldn't be signing at a place that you're drafting a quarterback 3, even if you give him that money. After bouncing around from Browns to Panthers to Rams to Bucks, he's going to want more stability, which is why
but
he'd
he
resign.
doesn't have that much stability with this contract situation with the Bucks. So being 2 years guaranteed, if I had to eat a full year in year two and that quarterback was ready, I would do it. I don't think any. And here's the other thing: I don't think any of these quarterbacks are going to be ready. Um,
Year 2, they
may
might be.
maybe year two. The way that they are, I think it's really going to be year three is when they're going to be more so ready. So that's why I would have taken the risk with signing someone like that to get you through those 2 years, because I don't want to waste this defense that they have, because it's not a full rebuild. And like Darren Vlasky was saying, and a bunch of other people were saying, what's his name? Oh, the jackass that's on the radio with um Colin Coward was talking about how devoid of talent this team was. This isn't a full rebuild. It's basically you have three positions that you need to solve for, which they haven't. Where they have a very good defense. They've got almost a pretty good offensive line when healthy.
Granted, Cole Strange health, we don't know. He's
Yeah,
been
that's one
hurt
thing.
the
We don't
past few
know anything
years. Yeah.
about what's going on with him. I would assume it's an ACL just off of what it looked like, but we don't really know. Um, but they have some players that they could put in that are going to be year two there. So they have a running back. They've got decent tight ends, and they have good depth wide receivers. They need an offensive tackle. They need a quarterback, and they need a wide receiver. That's really all they need. Theoretically, I would like another boundary cornerback, but that's just being
Yeah.
greedy. So they have three needs, three big main needs. That's not a complete rebuild. That's I have three needs I need to find for. I can really solve those three needs in one draft. Um, because theoretically, a tackle is pretty easy to try and find. They already have a Wenu where
Quality left tackles in the mid rounds is tougher. Bill
it's
has
tougher,
been
but
able
you
to get
also, as long as you could get a stable one, you don't need an all pro left tackle if you have an all pro right tackle. It's easier to scheme around if you know one specific area you need to kind of block up, and you can make your scheme kind of work to have that shortcoming. Not every team has two great tackles. They have, if they're lucky, they have one. And they have that with Michael Wenu. So what I would have done in that situation is I would have I would have had Baker so that way you don't waste 2 years. And I would have drafted the quarterback. I don't know if we talked about this last episode, but I would have still drafted the guy, drafted the wide receiver, drafted the tackle, and then you would figure out what the hell's going to happen at quarterback in the next 2 or 3 years. But
yeah.
for the first year or two, you would know who's going to be playing, and that way you kind of do a a better transition and you use more of that defense that you have rather than wasting the prime of. So here's the thing too: if Matt Judon is Matt Judon really going to be part of a rebuild where they win 4 games for like 2 years each?
I wouldn't be surprised if he's traded, to be honest.
I would, and that's the thing too. I would trade him. There's no point in having him and paying him if you don't plan on winning this year because he's already up. He's what 32, 33. He's coming off of a bicep tear. I you're just wasting him at this point if you have um no plan to actually win
31
this
turning
year.
32 in August.
Yeah, so he's turning 32. If you have no plan to actually win this year and this is supposed to be a bridge year to year 2 or year 3, there's really no sense in having him. So you're just wasting him around. Uh
So my thoughts are A, I wouldn't be surprised if he's traded, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they give him a contract extension. So he is making less money this year because he had more money brought up front last year. So
mhm.
if you sign him for a 3-year extension with pretty much no guaranteed year three, but you could do that. And the reason why I like Brissett is A, he's someone that everyone in the locker room loves. B, he can be a game manager where he's definitely not going to win you games, but more often than not, he's not going to lose you games. He might occasionally. I remember on Thanksgiving, I think he did it with the Colts, but for the most part, he's not going to lose you games, but he's also going to be a great mentor. He knows what he's signed up to do. My guess is be a bridge quarterback, compete for the starting job this year, but also mentor the rookie quarterback that they draft. He's been able to do that throughout his entire career. Everyone in the locker room loves him. He's essentially like what Brian Hoyer when the Patriots brought Brian Hoyer back to be that essential additional quarterback coach and someone that's willing to do it. Versus bringing in Baker, someone that's competing for his job. Do you trust him to help mentor the rookie, especially if he's fighting for his job? How hostile the at least the reports are in the locker room the last few years with Mac and Zappy, how they were both fighting for their job and not really helping each other. In this situation, if you're using a top 5 pick on a quarterback, you want to make sure that they're your future. They're the future of the franchise. You want to help them in their development. So
Well,
that's why A, with as tough as the schedule is this year, B, Mayo's inexperience as head coach, along with DeMarcus Covington's inexperience as defensive coordinator, which I like DeMarcus a lot, but I think there's going to be some growing pains this year. This is kind of a wash year, and you're pretty much putting all your eggs in your basket for the following year. And I was going to bring this up. I might as well bring it up now, but if you look at the contracts that they gave out this year, almost all of them are 1 year deals, with the exception of Michael Wenyu, who's a 3 year deal, Anthony Jennings, who's a 3 year deal, but he's young. So both Wenyu and Jennings are young. It makes sense. Antonio Gibson, 3 year deal. Uh, Taki, 2 year deal. Every other contract they gave out outside of Henry and Bourne were 1 year deals. So you're not spending a lot of money on cap space for a year that you're probably not going to be competing anyway. So going into next offseason, you're going to have a ton of cap space as well. Having a rookie quarterback on a rookie contract where you can then invest your money on the surrounding team, sort of like what the 49ers have done the last few years and why they've been so successful. Is Brock Purdy a top 10 quarterback? I don't think so. You could make an argument considering, like you said, quarterback isn't really that great in the NFL right now, but because of how talented the rest of the team is, they're successful. That's how you want to build a roster to win. If you give a lot of money to Baker or someone like that, and you're stuck in mediocrity, you're not going to really be able to do that. So by bringing in Brissett to be that mentor, even bringing him back next year at similar money, which isn't much, then you're hoping that Drake May or Jaden Daniels or, God forbid, JJ McCarthy the following year, they're ready. Even if they're not a top 10 quarterback, if they can be a game manager like Mac was his rookie year, you're going to have enough talent around him to be successful. So that's why, based on everything, I went into this offseason not having high success or high expectations for this upcoming season. I'm perfectly content with them competing, but if they don't win, that's great as long as they go into the following year with anticipation of winning. But again, this is all, in my opinion, you have to sit the rookie year one unless you feel completely comfortable, like CJ Stroud, the Texans with CJ Stroud. You think he's ready for it? But looking at the tape and everything, especially with Drake May, I don't think he's ready. Jaden Daniels, you can make an argument, maybe yes, maybe no. His arm strength's a concern. But if the rookie you bring in sits year one, Jacoby just balls out or just plays, especially what ball out was the wrong word. You don't have a left tackle right now. So also that's the other thing that makes me think you have to sit the rookie. So you're essentially throwing Jacoby to the wolves is what I meant to say.
Yeah.
But he's content with it. He signed up for it. He knew what he was signing up for. So by doing this, it's kind of a wash year, which as a fan you don't really want to hear, especially after a 4-13 year, after not making the playoffs 2 years or three of the last four. But looking forward to the future, the way to build a team to win a Super Bowl, I'm happy with what they've done, even with not spending a lot of money on wide receivers, 1 year deals or 2 year deals. You can roll over unused cap space. So by not going up to the cap, you can spend that amount of money. I know I've been talking a lot, but this allows you for year two to put in all that money to help invest around the team for the quarterback on the rookie contract, hopefully starting his first year.
Year two, though, they already have $125 million in cap space available.
I
So
know, but also
the
I want them to extend Christian Barmore,
Mhm.
which is going to be 25 to 30 million. I want them to extend Jabril Peppers. I want them to extend Tavai. So there's players on your team you want to extend.
There's players you can
For,
extend, but still not going to be anywhere close to spending that amount of money. And you could have front loaded a contract for Baker where it would easily be palatable to eat that money year two if you had to.
yeah.
Um,
That's fair, but again, I don't think he moves the needle for you. And by having that amount of cap space, maybe you can trade for a wide receiver one, or you can trade for Chris Olave, who the Saints are just. I don't understand how the Saints will ever get out of their cap situation because you have to spend a certain amount each year, and they're just in cap hell for eternity. So you can't really say I'm going to eat all, cut everyone, and just have 180 million in dead cap this year because you
Mhm.
have to spend a certain amount. And then also, even if you cut every single player that has cap savings, I think they're still like 40 million over the cap. So
Oh yeah, so they keep having to resign all these guys to
yeah,
extend them so that way they can add dummy years, and they're never it's gonna be a while before they ever reset, just
Yeah.
based off of what the maneuvers they've had to do. Sean Payton really kind of screwed them in last, so like,
Yeah.
it will be interesting, and we'll see what he really does in Denver because he's kind of doing the same thing there with Russell
He's at
Wilson,
least
and
he's cutting bait.
yeah,
I would have liked if they had the Russell Wilson 80 million cap all year one, but they split it
hmm
across two. But again, like with this offseason, what they've done so far, I'm content with it because like you said, the free agency group wasn't that great this year. You're not spending a lot of money just to spend money on a guy, which I was worried that they were gonna give
hmm
money to just to burn cash if it wasn't the right fit. And then again, like I said, I'm not expecting them this year to compete. And I'm also based on the signings, it's reaffirming my thought that I'm hoping that they sit the rookie year one. So if they do that, that unless the rookie is like CJ Stroud where he's completely ready, which I don't think they will, but and if they do, so be it. But based on that, let the rookie learn year one and then go out the gates year two.
yeah. Terrified still that, and we talked about this a little bit, where and we've seen, and we haven't really mentioned this yet, but just Bob Kraft's kind of statements and comments and what the change from when Bill was here, from when Bill's not here.
Yep.
And Bob's been kind of running his mouth more, and it does seem like he's trying to make it seem like he was partly responsible for the dynasty, and kind of show why he's important. And I'm just afraid that he's going to step in and try and have that rookie quarterback start, and he's going to say,
I'm worried about that too. Him and
Why
Mayo.
isn't my number 3 overall pick starting?" Where he's mentioned multiple times how we've never had a pick this high in my time, and we really need a quarterback at that position. The fan in me wants this, and everything he's kind of alluded to makes it sound, eh, like he's not gonna want that guy to sit.
Yep.
And we know how he feels about quarterbacks that they draft. He treats every single guy that they draft like he's his fifth child. He's had like 10 children that aren't his own,
Yeah.
um, so- over the last 30, 20, 30 years. So, um, and
No,
he's
I
also
agree, and
responsible
that is a
for.
fear I have. But the one thing that at least is reassuring is they have again, if this is their plan all along is this free agency and then they start the rookie year one, I think this is a massive mistake. You need to at least have wide receivers brought in, even if you overpay, so you help with the quarterback's development. Same with the
Mhm,
left tackle. Even if you have to overpay, you need to protect their blind side, unless it's Michael Penix, because
mhm.
he's a lefty, so his blind side is Michael Menu. But so that's why I'm assuming the rookie sits year one. But if they're planning on starting the rookie day one of training camp, I think
Oh,
this
this
is a
whole offseason was asinine if that was the
yes,
case. Because then
100%.
they had the money, they should have signed Smith. Why am I blanking on his first name? The tackle from the Cowboys. They should have signed
Yep.
him to be the left tackle. They should have paid Keenan Allen to be a wide receiver, even though I think he's overpaid, hurt, and is on the downward spiral of his career.
Yeah,
I
he
would
had
have
the best year of his of his career last year,
it's
Kevin.
still
I mean, he's still
I don't
older,
he's
but
old and
yeah,
he's not gonna keep it up. It was a
yeah.
contract year.
But at
But
that money, he's worth that money. But again, he only has 1 year left on his contract, which is why I
mhm,
was content with not trading for him because I'm assuming that Jacoby Brissett is the quarterback this year and that the rookie isn't going to
mhm.
benefit from him.
Yeah,
If you're planning on starting the rookie day one, yes, you should have traded for Keenan
you should
Allen
have
for
traded
what
for
it's at.
Keenan Allen. You should have overpaid even more for Calvin Ridley
Yep.
and figured something out.
Yep.
But it's all going to depend. So if they plan, if that rookie quarterback starts um, game one and they don't do anything other than just draft a wide receiver to try and fix this, it's a disaster. I think
Yeah.
because he's not going to be set up to succeed and he's going to have issues. And none of these guys, I think, are good enough from what I've seen. And again, there's more tape I need to watch. I haven't watched a shit ton of all of them, but I have a decent understanding how they'll be. None of these guys seem like they're ready for game one, except for I would say Penix is one of them because he's 26 years old, and he's been
24.
around.
He's a 6 year starter, but
24?
he's
I don't know
24.
why I thought he was 26. Is someone 26?
No.
No, you
Him,
sure?
him and Bo Nix are both 6 year starters. Jaden Daniels a 5 year starter, so they have
Yeah.
a lot of experience.
Yeah.
But
So anyway,
I
I would say, Penix, Daniels, I would say has to kind of still start. Well, not has to, but I could see Daniels starting
Yep.
because he's been around more and he's seen more, and he just has the ability to kind of when you're mobile, you just have the ability to kind of make more plays and not be as pressured as much.
Yep.
And then Caleb Williams, obviously, you're drafting someone number one overall, you're not setting him. So,
Caleb has the talent. It just depends on if he
mhm,
can translate the
mhm.
processing NFL defenses and putting in the commitment.
Yeah, May, I'm terrified of him starting day one unless
Yep.
he completely changes things over the offseason, really fixes his. I know supposedly he's been working on his footwork and his mechanics and all that sort of stuff. I think it's going to take longer than 3 or 4 months, but
Yeah.
who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Um, unless he drastically improves that over the next few months, and then even JJ McCarthy, where uh, I don't know. I feel like it might be him. It's either him or May. They're definitely sticking and picking at
Yeah.
three. Um,
We'll talk about the draft in the
yeah.
coming episode, but
All right. So anyway, depending on what their plan is, if they just plan on doing the rookie quarterback playing this whole offseason, even though we said like if I had to grade what they did, I'd say probably B plus.
yeah, I'd say
Um,
B plus.
A would have been trying to maybe trade for like a wide receiver or someone.
Yep.
But not not that they knocked it out of the park, but I think they had a decent one. If they plan on starting a rookie quarterback, this was a D.
I agree.
Um,
D at best.
yeah. All right. We talked a lot. We mentioned all the guys. We already discussed last week Chuck Okafor. Supposedly they plan on having him be the left tackle competing with the whoever they
Competing,
draft.
which makes sense because to an extent, he was a 4-year starter with the Steelers at right
Hmm.
tackle. Only reason why he was benched was he called out his his offensive coordinator, which isn't great. But he also played left tackle in college, so he has some experience, not a lot of money. So it makes sense if you're signing him and then you're planning on drafting a left tackle in the
Hmm.
second or third round. And then if the tackle isn't ready game one or just year one, you go with Okafor, hope for the best. And then if the tackle is ready, then you just have good depth.
Hmm.
So it makes sense. Not a lot of money. You would have had to give up more money for the other tackles, but we'll have to see.
Right. And then just briefly, quickly, players that left: Corey Davis, Mac Wilson. We talked about Trent Brown. Good riddance to the Bengals, and Miles Bryant. So
I was
again,
sad to see Miles go. Even Mac Wilson too. Mac Wilson played
hmm.
exceptional the second half of the year. And then Miles Bryant, I know he's been a punching bag of fans in New England the past few years, but he had an exceptional year last year.
Hmm.
Um, wasn't perfect by any means, but he was very good. He was very dependable. He played out the boundary cornerback when you needed him. He played slot cornerback. He played safety. He played in the box and was an exceptional tackler. So he really made strides. So it's good to see him at least get a chance somewhere else. I would have liked him to stay here, but it is what it is.
Yep. All right. I think that kind of wraps up what we had for today. We are going to have some upcoming draft episodes. Definitely at least just one straight one on the quarterbacks and kind of go through the different quarterbacks that were out there in the draft. And then a overall kind of draft podcast as well. We'll see if we throw anything else in there. We're going to try and maybe get at least one or two guests for the overall draft one. Um, and we have some names in mind that we'll be reaching out to and hopefully get some collaboration there. So excited there to see how that goes. I do plan on having us try and blog more over this off season, and
Yeah.
I'm putting that challenge out to you, Eric, because you have a little bit more time than I do. So getting some of these upcoming episodes kind of also blogged at the same time as having an audio component. So maybe kind of breaking down plays or videos and that sort of shit. So again, looking forward to talk to you guys in the coming weeks over the draft. I can't wait for the draft to be over. I'm so
Yep.
sick of seeing all these mock drafts and version 5, version 6. What happens with this trade? What happens with this? I will miss the annual one that some people put out of Bill's glory drafts where it's all like Navy and
Yep.
like special
Long
teamers, but
snappers. Yeah.
um I will miss seeing that, but maybe we'll get that again next year if he's a coach for the Cowboys or the Giants. So um Again, talk to you guys next time. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and mainly X, Twitter at Pat's 300 Level Pod for any up to minute updates, commentary. Lots of interactions there lately. So, really having some fun there. And make sure to subscribe, rate, review. Follow. You can listen again. You're listening on any of your sort of podcast platforms or on YouTube. We're also newly on Rumble. So, add us on there. Don't really know much about it other than just being another video platform. So if you like Rumble, you can find it there. And talk to you guys next time.